This video is about the fundamentals of independence around the drums. If you're a beginner drummer who's having trouble playing whatever you want, by the end of this video, you'll have a good grasp on 16th and 8th note patterns, how to place them around your body in space and time, and you'll pick up some cool beats along the way. I'm going to use the same methods here that I use with all of my students. So we're pretty much just going to grid out patterns on the bass and snare over a steady hi-hat grid. Then we're going to combine everything into useful beats, and along the way, I'll show you some tricks to master this stuff quickly. So I'll be using a little bit of jargon in this video, as usual. If you don't know how to read music, you can still follow along just fine, and I'll be walking you through it a little bit. So this is probably going to take a while to get used to, and that's okay, that's normal. But the big tip here is to go slow and use a metronome and really break everything down over and over again so you know exactly where it's supposed to go, and you get the muscle memory on your body to react to what you're hearing in your head. So you can start to play with what you're thinking instead of thinking about what you're playing. Okay, let's start with 8th note independence. For this, we're going to keep steady 8th notes on the hi-hat. That is our grid. We have 8 8th notes in a bar. Our strong beats are 1, 2, 3, 4, and the weak beats are all the spaces in between, or the ands. So for one measure, these 8th notes are counted 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And for 8th note independence, we're just lining up our snare and our bass to different parts of that grid. So the most important thing here is to keep this grid, the notes on our hi-hat, even and consistent. Now in looking at this music, the hi-hat is the X's on top, the snare is the note in the middle, and then the bass drum is the note on the bottom. So you can literally just line these things up to the grid on the hi-hat. We're gonna start with the beat that you probably already know. Bass on 1, snare on 2, bass on 3, snare on 4. Now let's go ahead and play bass on every downbeat. Now let's play bass on 1 and bass on 3 and. Now we're just going to isolate that offbeat. So we're going to take off the 1, we're going to take off the 3, and we're just going to play the and of 1 and the and of 3. So now we're going to move this grid 1/8 note to the right. We're going to play and 2 and 4. Now we'll take off that and, we'll just play 2 and 4. Now we're going to play 2 and 4 and. Now we're going to put bass on 1 and the and of 2, and then 3 and the and of 4. And now we're just going to play bass on every offbeat. So all that's left to do is to combine some of those things together. That's the idea. Experiment with that. Now let's do the same thing with our snare drum. So we're already used to playing on 2 and 4. So we're going to put our bass just on 1 and 3, and then we're going to try to play every downbeat with our snare. Now let's just go ahead and play all the offbeats for the snare. Now we'll kind of go through this grid a little bit. So first let's just start with 1 and 3 and. Now we'll do just the and of 1 and the and of 3. Now we're going to do and 2 and 4. We already know how to do 2 and 4, so now we're going to do 2 and 4 and. Let's try combining all of this together. So that's the idea with 8th notes. We're just lining things up to our hi-hat. This next part is where people usually start to struggle a little bit, because instead of lining everything up to our hi-hat, we're going to be putting things in between those spaces with 16th notes. So we're going to keep the same grid of 8th notes on the hi-hat. This is where it's super important to make sure that it's consistent. So now these 8th notes are our strong beats, and the 16th note off beats are the weak beats. Just like how we can split one quarter note into 2 8th notes, we can take both of those 8th notes and split them each into 2 16th notes. We still have our 1 and our and in the same place and time, but now in between those we have the E and the 1 E and So for one beat we have 4 16th notes. We can play all of them, or some of them, or one of them, or none of them. Again, if you don't know how to read music, you can still read these beats the same way we just did with the eighth notes. So before we were lining things up to that eighth note grid and just seeing where they land. Now we're going to do the same thing, but there might be notes in between the eighth note grid. So you just place it in between your hand swinging on the eighth note grid. If that doesn't make sense, just stick around for a second and I think it will. Starting on the bass, we're going to do 1E. 1E and 2 and 3E and 4 and. Now, if you're following along at home, you might have done this, which is following your hi-hat notes with your foot. That's really common to do. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to do that by choice, but we don't want to be forced to do that. So something that can really help with this is just saying what you're doing. If you just isolate your hand and your foot, think both foot right. Even say it out loud, both foot right. And then all you have to do is add your snare afterwards. Both foot right, snare, and both foot right, snare, and. Okay, now let's isolate just that E, just the E of 1 and the E of 3. So instead of both foot right, we're going to do right foot right, snare, and. Now moving this grid along, we're going to do the E of 1 and the and. Right foot both, snare, and. We don't need to isolate the and because that's an eighth note. So now we'll do and right both foot, snare, and. Great, now let's just isolate the right foot, snare. So now on the bass, you're gonna have 1, and then 3, both right foot, snare, and. Now for fun, let's just put every offbeat on the bass drum. Now let's start combining some of these things on the bass drum into more useful patterns. Same thing with the snare now. We're just going to do 2E and 4E to start, and we're going to put bass on 1 and 3 again. When I say both now, it refers to our hands. Right, both left, right, both left, right. Okay, now let's just isolate the E. Right, left, right. Now let's move to E and. Right, left, both. Again, we don't need to isolate the and because we've already done that. So now let's do and right, both left. Now let's just isolate the right, left, right. Now let's go ahead and do 2 and 4 And again, let's start combining some of these things on different beats for your snare drum. Now we're just going to combine everything. Keep in mind, this is a process. So if you play along with me in this video, you're going to be able to do the things that I'm trying to get you to do. But being able to use them freely and creatively will take a little bit of time. You need to make this stuff muscle memory. We want to be able to play what we're thinking instead of thinking about what we're playing. Help me out by subscribing, giving me a like, leaving a comment, and hit the bell because I have new videos coming out every single week. Hit the description for the free PDF of all the things that we did today, as well as a link to my website for lessons. I have my Instagram link down there, and I have a link to my music, which is available on all platforms. Thanks for watching. See ya.